These are the times that being a reviewer becomes interesting, because if it was not for the fact that I review movies and shows, I wouldn't watch this show. This is a very, very weird show. Now, a disclaimer, I have never seen the original show. I don't understand the tone, apart from GIFs and a few memes or here. I've never really seen that, not even a single episode, not even a clip on YouTube. So I don't understand how that works. I'm not an American, I'm from Kenya, so the American culture is something that I only see through media. I've never really had that American experience. So as I talk about Good Times, Black is Back, I am going to talk about the show the way I watched it, as just an ordinary viewer, as an animation fan, and as a Netflix subscriber. So let's get into it. The first thing, my goodness, is there any positive? I'm trying to think of anything positive to say about this show, and perhaps the voice acting. I think the voice talent is pretty impressive. Is he called JB Smoove? Yeah, he voices the main character, the dad. It's pretty awesome. Masai Martins voices the sister, and other great actors that we've seen. In fact, there are voices that you hear here and there, you go like, I know that is Geoffrey. I know that might be someone else that I know. There are a lot of familiar. There's a point that there was a voice actor that I thought was Jay-Z, a smart car. I was so sure that it was Jay-Z. And then there is another Trump impersonation somewhere. So there are a lot of familiar things within the show. I'm trying to look at the positives. Look, give me just be easy, be patient with me. I'm just trying to look at the positives. So there are a pocket of those voice actors that you go like, they did a great job with the material that they were given. And the material is extreme. For the lack of a better word, the material it's pretty extreme. It's like they went all out. It feels more positives. Now, still looking on the positives, episode 8 was pretty interesting. Episode 8, I think, was the episode that they used to pitch this show to the other actors, because it's the son now who is working on a comic book where they have a chicken superhero called Mother Clucker. And if you think the name is weird, what you watch during the events of what he does in order to be that superhero, it's some weird, extreme stuff. Yeah, I understand it's animation, and animation is supposed to be weird and absurd, but they just cranked it to 1000. But in terms of style, visual style, in terms of the animation in itself, that looks like the original vision of the show, because it's a very good looking, stylistic episode. It looks good. It looks like it was lifted from a comic book. They play a lot with the perspectives. There's an action set piece between the sister and the now Mother Clucker, which was it was okay. It's a short one, but it was okay. But generally, how they use silhouettes, how they light up the environments, it looks good. That episode for me was like, yes, this I think is what was pitched. Then everything else is what they decided to do. So apart from that, now, yes, the animation characters themselves, they look very, when you pause, that's when they look good. But when they start becoming animated, then that becomes a problem. The movement is the problem. But positive, keep it positive for now. The other positive thing was the backgrounds. The backgrounds actually look very well, because at some point I was like, this thing can't be all bad. So I stepped away from looking at the characters, then I started looking at the backgrounds. The backgrounds are actually done, it's decent. The backgrounds are decent. They actually, the houses, they're stylistic. They use interesting color palettes. They use a lot of glowing lights. The rendering looks actually good. It looks like they were actually rendered meaning that they have shadows and light, and they have textures. You can actually see that there was an effort to create very, very interesting backgrounds. And the assets, like the cars, there are things that they do with those assets that they do not do with the characters. Okay, so I think apart from that, the fact that they are like around 20 to 30 minutes, they are very short, and they have that familiar sitcom structure whereby each episode has a theme and they go through it up to the end, and so each episode feels like it's its own standalone theme. The other thing that I consider a positive is that they actually experimented. They worked a lot on creating something that is actually, they try to do things that are unique they're familiar in the pop culture industry, but they really made an effort to try to create unique scenarios. There was a sense of creativity in how they were driving some of these stories. They were wild, they were absurd, they were totally out of this world, but there's an effort to actually do some. There's an episode, I think it's episode 5, where the houses don't have hot water, and so the wife has to go to the roof to do, she has to take the ice cubes and then go to the roof to get it electrocuted so that it can melt, so that it can be hot water. So that sequence of her leaving the house to the roof, it's pretty interesting. It's a callback to Indiana Jones, and I thought that was pretty cool. Oh my goodness, there is episode 7, which is Black Love. There is a subplot with the daughter and a gangster that is actually, I thought it was a pretty interesting love story, and how it ends and how everything ends. I thought those pockets of creative, genuine, good storytelling are there. But now we have to go into the bad. We have to go into the stuff that makes this show one of the wildest shows that I've ever seen. Now, still on the positives, there is an episode, I think it's episode 4. Just look out for it, just for the cameos that are there. Think of the world richest people, the 4 of them. The 3 of them. Just think about them. Think of what Elon Musk is doing with the SpaceX, whatever. I thought that was also a very interesting story. Now, the negatives. Number 1, tropes. Black American tropes and cliches. It's like they went 100% with them, from drugs to guns to a little baby who is a fucking gangster. How do you do that? How do you make a child a gangster? That for me didn't make sense. Like a grown up, the child behaves. You cannot tell if the child is a child or the child is an adult. I know it's an animated movie, an animated show. It's supposed to be as weird as they can get, but that child for me was one of the, because you couldn't tell, because he had a very weird relationship with the mom. Then he has this helper. Then he's a drug dealer outside. Sometimes he's a pimp. Sometimes but he's still a kid based on the fact that he's afraid of the dark or something. So those, that kid just weirded. It was just weird. The other thing, the animation and the character design for the main characters. When the character designs are not moving, they look okay. When they start moving and interacting, that becomes a problem, because it looks like a student's project. They move like it's a student project, whereby the animation is incomplete. Animation for animated movies, they usually use 12 frames per second. But in this, it looks like they were using around 6 frames per second. Because how do I put this? If you don't know how if you don't know how frame rates work, let me just give you an example. If I was animating this hand moving from here up to here, for 1 second you'd have 12 pictures from here up to here. So here you have the pose, you have the pose, then you have the next pose. So here you have this pose, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the next pose. So between those two, you have another pose. You have a keyframe, then you have the other frames. You have like 6 over here, then 6 over here. So you have this to this to this. And then now you put the frames between this middle pose and this one, you add more frames. So it looks much smoother. So the more frames you have, the more smoother your work will look. The less frames that you work, the more janky it will look. So for example, if you move from 12 to something like 8, it will look a bit janky. It will look janky, it will look very janky. If you move from 12 to 5, it will look extremely janky, it will look off. Now these guys look like they went from pose to pose, like from this pose to the middle pose to the last pose, and they did not add the in-between frames. So it looks extremely janky. The characters, the motion doesn't look smooth. The motion doesn't even look the way an animated motion is supposed to look like. So that for me was odd. The character designs, the line work, the eyes are like boxy instead of circular, and they don't have that white whatever that makes everything look like it's alive. So I had a problem with that. I had a problem with just how they just wanted to be absurd for the sake of being absurd. They were pushing the envelope so much so that it takes you out of the show. I was absolutely struggling with just how where they were trying to take this, because I was frustrated by now I'm stepping away from the animation and the technical part. I was frustrated by just how much they just focused on the tropes, the negative tropes that are associated with black people: violence, drugs, sex. There's a lot of I don't know how I don't like how the women are displayed in the film. Apart from the major character, all the other side characters, I just didn't like. I don't know if that's the way it is in America. It did not make me feel good about the black community, and it didn't feel as creative as Black Dynamite. Black Dynamite has its own issues, the animated show, but the way they try to depict the black culture, it's over the top. It feels like something from the 70s, but there's a charm to it that doesn't make it feel like it was just outright trying to be absurd. There's a sensibility to Black Dynamite and Akina Rick and Morty, those absurd animation that lacks in this particular show, because everything sometimes is like they're trying to be extreme for the sake of just being extreme. I would watch a scene and I would think there's a scene that they have a flooded room, and there's a yobo who just flies out of the on top of everyone like a dolphin or like a whale, and just jumps into the water, and the dad is proud, and I'm like, do you know this guy? Who is this character? Why is this character there? I mean, it makes sense for what he does during a particular period when they're just about to leak particular information. He jumps and grabs the phone and just dives into the water. That makes sense. But for the majority of part, you have a lot of this pocket of random characters who are there to just be absurd for the sake of being absurd. You understand? Now, I'm not saying that they don't add value to the story. They kind of do. There's a mouse in a particular, I think it's episode 9. I thought his story was interesting, but that's because I had seen him in previous episodes. So as he comes into this, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't feel off. It doesn't feel like a shocker, like, boom, look, here's a mouse holding a gun. Because I had seen him in previous episodes, I've seen what they were doing. He was well established, so that was not a shock. But there are other smaller characters who are just randomly introduced for that shock value. So that for me was and it looks like they were just looking for shock value. It's not earned. It's like there for the sake of, you have, even when you think of Rick and Morty can be absurd, but the absurdity is contained in such a way that it actually makes sense. It's crazy. You have all those spectacular things that wouldn't really happen in the real world, but they're explained in such a way that from a science perspective, it can actually make sense. It's something that it's a possibility. There is logic to it. While most of the things, or most of the plot points within these stories, especially for each episode, sometimes you know that they have a core story, they have a core concept, but they just find a way of making it absurd every now and then. They have a way of taking characters in places that yes, it can really evolve these characters, but they want to make it absurd rather than actually make it an arc. I don't know if I'm making sense. They just want that shock of, look what this character did, look what this type of character is, look how crazy this insane character is, look how insane this scenario is. So for me, I was like, there's the menstrual period episode. I think it's episode 3, whereby they go into a fantastical world like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but this is different. So you have a bad guy who's more like a Trump, and you have this other floating whatever, and you can actually see their hanging balls as they fly. So I'm like, was that really necessary? Yes, it's really entertaining and funny, but really, did you need to add that onto that? I mean, yes, and then just the concept of what they were trying to do. Yes, it makes sense. If you were to look at the skeleton of that particular episode, it actually makes sense. But these other, absurd things that they've added takes away from the joy of what they were trying to do. I wish that it wouldn't have been that. It's extreme. It's not extreme, it's extreme. Then they take that extreme and then they push it to more extreme, over the edge. They make it edgier. So yeah, that it was disgusting for me. I'm not an American. I'm not an African American. I don't know about the African American experience, but this was far more absurd, and I didn't feel good watching it. Yes, it was very entertaining. I won't take it away from that. The writing is actually really good, and the dialogues are pretty entertaining. And it's a show that I actually wanted to see the next episode because one, I had to review it, and two, I wanted to know if they were going to improve on it. You know, some shows, the first episode might be, you know, over the top, but then when you go into the second and the third episode, you find that they actually have something constructive. But in this, they don't. It's the same thing. Apart from episode 8, which looks much refiner, more polished, they don't have that. It still feels like junk food, like stale junk food, not like junk food. It's junk food, you know, that then it's stale, you know, it's unhealthy. You take it, you start vomiting, and you start having other. That's how I felt about this particular show. So yeah, there's good talent, there's good voice work. There are really good stories within that madness. I like the color palette of the Masai Martin's character, the sister. Her color palette, her outfit, her hair, the general subtleness of the palette, it's something that I was drawn to. I'm an artist, I'm a graphic designer, so I spotted that out and I was like, yeah, that's interesting, that's well designed. But outside that, her design, her movement, for me was like, and the situation that she kept finding herself in. Sometimes I would feel her introduction is even, wow, this is just absurdity for the sake of absurdity. So if I was to give this out of 5, I would give this a solid 1.5 for just the fact that it actually, there's something, you can actually see something outside the absurdity and the madness that happens every time that something sensible is about to happen. There's a story. There are some very, very funny moments, genuinely funny moments, but they end up getting ruined by someone doing something stupid or someone portraying the black culture in a certain way that, you know, does not make me as an African actually pretty much feel good. There's an African character who is navy blue, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I know it's animated, you're supposed to do anything with it. She's a Nigerian princess. I thought, yeah, that's pretty cool, but only Sudanese people are actually that dark. African people are not that dark. Nigerian people are not that dark. Navy blue dark. Those are Sudanese, South Sudanese. Those are the ones that are actually super dark. You see, there are moments like that I'm like, okay, but I see you're trying to like push it over the edge. So I give this a 1.5. I was put off by the style, I was put off by the absurdity, I was put off by the madness of it all. But generally the voice acting was pretty cool. There's a story, there are some really good dialogue, there are really funny moments within it. Episode 8 for me was the show, what was supposed to be the show, but they just throw it off board. And that's why I just give it 1.5 out of 5. So basically that's it. Have you seen the show? What did you think? Did you vomit after watching this? Did you turn it off? Did you like take a step back? What did you feel after watching these episodes? If you saw episode 8, do you have the same thoughts as I do, or do you think that the whole thing was garbage? Basically that's it. Thanks for watching. Remember to always watch what you enjoy and enjoy what you watch. Thanks for being here. I'll see you on the next one. I'm on an arc to 100k. Will you be here? Will I still be here? Will I be doing the same thing the same way? Will I be in the same space? Will I be still as, you know, real with you as I am currently? Or will I evolve into something different? Will you evolve into something different? Will we have this conversation in the future whereby you tell me, dude, I remember when you came up, you were ABCDEFG, you have changed. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.